John, the 62-year-old host with his trademark wry smile, stood backstage, flipping through his notes. His producer, Emily, a sharp-eyed 40-year-old woman, approached, clutching a tablet. "Marty's tense," she said quietly. "Says he's got a bombshell for the show. Didn't specify, but he's demanding extra time." "Scorsese with a bombshell?" John raised an eyebrow. "That's either genius or we're all out of a job tomorrow." Emily shrugged, but her eyes betrayed worry. In the green room, Martin Scorsese, 82, sat before a mirror, nervously wringing his hands. His gray hair was neatly combed, but his face radiated tension. A bottle of water sat untouched nearby. His agent, Linda, tried to reason with him. "Marty, are you sure?" she asked, adjusting her glasses. "This could spark a scandal." "I've been silent my whole life, Linda," Martin snapped, his voice trembling with pent-up emotion. "People need to know the truth. I'm tired of hiding." Meanwhile, the U.S. was roiling with political fervor. Midterm elections loomed, and debates over cultural identity and heritage fueled heated arguments. For the Italian-American community, especially those over 55, these issues hit hard. Stereotypes about the mafia, prejudices against outsiders, these were part of their lived experience. Scorsese, whose films often tackled these themes, was an icon to them. But tonight, he was preparing to say something that could upend their perception of him. The show began. John strode onto the stage to applause, his quip about the latest political scandal drawing laughs. Without much preamble, he introduced the guest. "Ladies and gentlemen, the man whose films make us think, feel, and double-check if our doors are locked, Martin Scorsese." Martin stepped onto the stage, waving briefly before sitting. His small frame in a dark suit seemed almost fragile under the spotlights, but his eyes burned with resolve. The audience clapped, sensing the tension. "Marty, great to see you," John began, leaning back in his chair. "Your films are always about identity, struggle, roots. But tonight, you look like you've got something big to say. What's going on?" Martin took a deep breath. The studio fell silent, only the faint hum of the lights audible. "John, I've never said this publicly," he began, his voice quiet but firm. "I'm Sylvester Stallone's cousin." The audience gasped. John froze, his eyebrows shooting up. "Wait, Sly? Rocky? Rambo?" he asked, unable to hide his shock. "You're serious?" Martin nodded. "Our mothers were sisters. We grew up together in Queens, shared family dinners, but we never spoke about it. The family asked us to keep quiet." John shook his head, trying to process. "This is like finding out Spielberg is Bruce Willis's brother," he exclaimed, sparking laughter. "But why are you telling us now?" Martin gripped the armrests of his chair. "Because I'm tired of lies," he said, his voice quivering. "People think they know me, the guy who makes mafia movies. They call Sly a dumb musclehead. But we both fought prejudices. And I want people to know we're family and we're proud of each other." The audience erupted in applause, but John noticed a shadow cross Martin's face. Something was left unsaid. "Marty, that's huge, but I sense there's more," John said, leaning closer. "What else?" Martin paused, his fingers trembling. "There's something about our family," he said softly. "Something I just learned, and it could change everything." The studio went still. Backstage, Emily grabbed her phone, dialing the network's lawyers. John felt his heart race. What was Scorsese hiding? And why had he chosen this show to drop this bombshell? The Comedy Central studio was frozen. Martin Scorsese's words, "It could change everything," hung in the air, stirring whispers and glances among the audience. Jon Stewart, usually quick with a quip, sat silent, his eyes narrowing with curiosity. He knew this episode was teetering between a sensation and a disaster. "Marty, you can't just drop a line like that and stop," John said, leaning forward. His tone was gentle but insistent. "What did you learn about your family? And why does it matter so much?" Martin pressed his lips together, his fingers trembling on the armrests. He cast a quick glance at the audience, as if seeking reassurance, then turned back to John. "It's not just about me or Sly," he began, his voice low but piercing. "It's about where we come from. About our family, about Italian Americans, about how we've been perceived. I always thought I knew my story. But a few months ago, I got a letter. An old letter from a distant relative in Italy. And it revealed something I can't ignore." The audience held its breath. Backstage, Emily, the producer, was frantically texting the network's lawyers, her face pale. She knew any revelation from Scorsese could have consequences, not just for him, but for the show. John tilted his head, his pulse quickening. "A letter?" he asked. "What was in it, Marty? Don't keep us hanging." Martin sighed, his shoulders slumping as if he'd been carrying a decades-long burden. "My grandfather, Francesco Scorsese, immigrated to America in 1910. We always thought he was just a poor peasant from Sicily looking for a better life. But the letter. It says he wasn't who he claimed to be. He fled Italy because he was being hunted. Not for debts or crime. For politics." The studio erupted in whispers. John raised a hand, calling for quiet. "Politics," he echoed. "What does your grandfather have to do with politics?" Martin looked at John, his eyes glistening with restrained emotion. "He was an activist. He fought against corruption in Palermo. The letter claims he stole documents exposing ties between local officials and the mafia. That put his family in danger. He fled to America, changed his name, hid his past. And me, Sly, all our relatives, grew up not knowing the truth." The audience gasped. John leaned back in his chair, his mind racing to process the information. "Wait, you're saying your grandfather was some kind of Sicilian whistleblower," he said, trying to lighten the mood with a quip. "This sounds like the script for your next movie." Laughter rippled through the studio, but Martin didn't smile. His face remained grave. "I thought it was a fable," he continued. "But I hired a researcher in Italy. He found records, documents. My grandfather didn't just flee. He left a chest in Palermo with evidence. And it's still there, John. Still hidden." Backstage, Emily clutched her head. She knew this episode was already going viral. Twitter was likely exploding with hashtags like #ScorseseSecret and #StalloneCousin. But she also knew Martin's revelation could have serious repercussions, especially in the Italian-American community, where issues of heritage and stereotypes were already sore spots. John sensed the studio's atmosphere shift. This was no longer just an interview. It was a confession that could rewrite the history of one of Hollywood's most famous families. "Okay, Marty, let's unpack this," he said, his voice calmer to keep the conversation grounded. "You're saying your grandfather left evidence against the mafia. What now? Are you going to find this chest?" Martin nodded, his gaze unwavering. "I don't know what's in it, John. Maybe documents that don't matter anymore. Or maybe something that still does. But I feel I have to do this. Not just for me or Sly, but for everyone who's struggled with labels, with prejudice. We're not just mob directors or dumb actors. We're a family with a story that deserves the truth." The audience burst into applause, but John noticed Martin looked drained, as if those words had cost him every ounce of strength. He decided to shift gears. "That's incredible, Marty," he said, smiling. "But let me ask, does Sly know you spilled this? Because I'm picturing him calling you, saying, 'Marty, what did you do?' I just wanted to make another Rocky." The audience roared with laughter, and even Martin cracked a small smile. "Sly knows," he said. "We talked about it. He said, 'Marty, if you want to tell the world, I'm with you. But don't expect me to go digging for chests in Sicily. I'm too old for that.'" The laughter grew louder, but John sensed the conversation wasn't over. He leaned closer. "Marty, you've dropped a bombshell," he said. "But I know you. You're not just telling a story. You want to change something. So what's next? Are you really going to Italy? Or is this your next film?" Martin sighed, his gaze distant. "I don't know, John. I'm old. I don't have the energy to shoot another epic. But I want to find that chest. Not for fame or money. To say, this is who we are. This is where we came from. And maybe that'll inspire others, Italian Americans, anyone who feels like an outsider, to tell their stories. The audience applauded again, this time with warmth and sincerity. John felt a warmth spread through his chest. He knew this moment wasn't just a TV spectacle. It was something more. We'll be right back to see if Martin Scorsese finds his chest, John said, turning to the camera. Don't go anywhere. As the cameras panned away and the music swelled, the tension in the studio lingered. Backstage, Emily rushed to John, holding her phone. John, Twitter's on fire, she said, her voice shaking. People are calling this the revelation of the year. But there's a problem. Some in the Italian-American community are calling it betrayal. They say Martin's stirring up mafia stereotypes. And there are rumors that some old Sicilian families aren't happy he's talking about documents. John frowned. Betrayal? For telling the truth. Emily nodded. They say it fuels stereotypes. And in Italy, there's talk that some families don't want this dug up. John glanced at Martin, who was talking with Linda near the stage. The director looked tired but resolute. Okay, John said. We're not done with this story. We need to talk to Marty, and maybe call Sly. Meanwhile, social media was ablaze. Some called Martin a hero, others a traitor. And in a small Sicilian town, an old man listening to the broadcast on the radio whispered, "They found it. Francesco, they finally found it." The Comedy Central studio buzzed with tension, like the air before a storm. The applause following Martin Scorsese's revelation about his grandfather's chest of anti-mafia evidence faded, leaving only the soft hum of the spotlights and the audience's murmurs. Jon Stewart, gripping his microphone, felt his pulse quicken. He knew this episode was already historic, but every word now could either elevate his show to legend or plunge it into scandal. "Marty," Jon began, choosing his words carefully, "you just told us your grandfather left a chest in Sicily with evidence against the mafia. It sounds like the start of your next film, but you say it's real. What are you going to do? Are you going to look for it?" Martin sat slightly forward, his hands tightly gripping the armrests. His eyes, usually calm and analytical, burned with a mix of determination and fear. "I don't know yet, John," he replied, his voice quiet but clear. "I'm old. I don't have the strength to run around Sicily like I did in my youth, shooting Raging Bull. But I can't just ignore this. That chest. It's not just about my grandfather. It's about all of us Italian Americans who lived under the weight of stereotypes. About people who fought and hid their truth to survive." The audience let out supportive cheers, but John noticed Martin looked exhausted, as if he'd just shed a lifelong burden. He decided to probe deeper, but gently, to preserve the moment. "Okay, let's step back from the chest for a second," John said, smiling to ease the tension. "You revealed you and Sylvester Stallone are cousins. That's already a shock. But how did Sly react to you sharing this?" "Because I'm imagining him sitting with a steak in his hand, saying, 'Marty, what have you done?'" Laughter rolled through the studio, and even Martin gave a faint smile, his face softening. "Sly, he was against it at first," Martin admitted. "Said it could cause trouble. People love spinning theories, you know. But when I told him about the letter, about our grandfather, he came around. He said, 'Marty, if you think it's right, I'm with you. But don't ask me to crawl through Sicilian basements. I'd rather shoot another Rocky.'" The audience laughed louder, and John felt the moment was right for a tougher question. "That's great that Sly's on board," he said, his tone softening. "But you mentioned stereotypes. You and Sly are icons for Italian Americans. Your films, his Rocky, they're stories of struggle, of rising above. But now you're opening this story about your grandfather. Aren't you afraid people will say, 'Oh, another mafia tale from Scorsese'?" Martin sighed, his gaze drifting as if he were back in 1950s Queens, where kids taunted him for his last name. "I am afraid, John," he said quietly. "All my life, I've fought this. People see The Godfather, Casino, Goodfellas, and think I glorify the mafia. But I tell stories about people, complex, wounded, like all of us. And now, learning about my grandfather. This isn't about the mafia. It's about courage. About one man who challenged a system and paid for it. I want people to see that side. The audience erupted in applause, and John felt warmth spread through him. He knew Martin wasn't just sharing a story. He was challenging everything society thought about him and those like him. Backstage, Emily stood with her phone pressed to her ear, her face pale. "Yes, I understand," she whispered to a lawyer. "But we couldn't stop it. It's Scorsese." "What? Reaction in Italy? What families?" She froze as an assistant showed her a tablet. Headlines flashed. Scorsese reveals family secret on Stewart show. Is Stallone tied to the mafia? Sicilian chest. Truth or fiction? Twitter was ablaze, with hashtags #Scorsese secret and #Stallone cousin trending. But among the comments were alarming ones. Scorsese betrays Italians. Why is he digging up dirt? Emily rushed to John as the cameras cut to a commercial break. "John, we're in trouble," she said, her voice trembling. "Some Italian-American groups are filing complaints. They say Martin's feeding mafia stereotypes. And in Italy, there are rumors that some old Sicilian families are upset. They don't want anyone digging into the past." John frowned, glancing at Martin, who was talking with Linda near the stage. Betrayal? For telling the truth? Emily nodded. "They say it reinforces stereotypes. And there's talk that some families don't want this chest found." John sighed, feeling the weight of the situation. "Then we need to protect him," he said. "And maybe call Sly. If they're cousins, he needs to know what his cousin's gotten into." Meanwhile, Martin sat backstage, holding the old, yellowed letter. His fingers trembled as he reread the faded ink. Francesco hid the truth in the stone house by the old church. No one must know until the time comes. Linda placed a hand on his shoulder. "Marty, are you sure you want to see this through?" she asked. "This could cost you everything." Martin looked up, his eyes filled with resolve. "If I don't do this, Linda, who will?" he said. "I've made films about courage. Now it's my turn to be brave." The next day, the news of the episode spread worldwide. In a small town near Palermo, an old man named Giuseppe, who'd heard the broadcast on the radio, stood by an old church, staring at a dilapidated stone house. His hands shook as he whispered, "They're coming, Francesco. They're coming for your truth." In New York, John sat in his office, sifting through viewer letters. Some called Martin a hero, others a traitor. But one handwritten note caught his eye, with just a few words. "Scorsese is in danger. Stop him." John felt a chill run down his spine. He grabbed his phone and dialed Sylvester Stallone. "Sly," he said when the actor answered. "Your cousin just stirred up a hornet's nest. We need to talk." New York hummed with its usual rhythm. Taxis honked at intersections. The smell of hot dogs wafted through the streets, and the evening lights of Manhattan reflected off the Hudson. But in Jon Stewart's office at Comedy Central, tension hung thick. After Martin Scorsese's bombshell episode, where he revealed his cousinship with Sylvester Stallone and his grandfather's hidden chest of anti-mafia evidence, the world exploded with reactions. Social media was ablaze. The Italian-American community split between those who saw Martin as a hero and those who accused him of betraying their heritage. And the threatening note, "Scorsese is in danger. Stop him," lay on John's desk like a ticking bomb. John sat at his desk, phone in hand. On the other end was Sylvester Stallone, his raspy voice tight with concern. "Sly, your cousin's thrown us into a whirlwind," John said, tapping a pen on the desk. "I got a letter. Someone wants Martin to stop. This is serious." Sly sighed, and John pictured him in his California home, perhaps holding a glass of wine or an old boxing trophy. "I told Marty this could end badly," Sly replied. "But you know him, stubborn as a Sicilian mule. If he's set on finding that chest, nothing's stopping him." "What's the letter say?" John read the note aloud, and Sly went quiet for a moment. "Damn," he finally said. "Could be some crazy fan. Or someone who knows more than we do. I'll talk to Marty. But, John, keep this quiet. If the press gets wind of threats, it'll be chaos." John nodded, though Sly couldn't see. "I'll try. But you know how Twitter works. Hashtag Scorsese secret is already trending. And there's talk that some old families in Italy aren't thrilled." "Old families," Sly muttered. "Always those damn old families. Look, I'm flying to New York tomorrow. We need to sort this out." Meanwhile, Martin Scorsese sat in his Upper East Side apartment. Rain pattered against the windows, and the room smelled of old books and coffee. On the table lay the yellowed letter from his Italian relative, next to a photo of his grandfather Francesco, a gaunt man with piercing eyes. Martin stared at the photo, as if seeking answers. His agent, Linda, sat across from him, holding a glass of water. "Marty, have you seen what they're saying?" she asked, her voice shaky. "The Italian-American Association is demanding an apology. They say you're tarnishing their culture. And in Palermo, some local historian said your words could reopen old wounds." Martin sighed, his fingers brushing the letter. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone, Linda," he said softly. "I just wanted the truth. For me, for Sly, for everyone who's felt like an outsider because of their name. But now, I don't know if I did the right thing." Linda leaned closer. "You can still back out," she said. "Say it was a mistake, that the letter was a fake. People will believe you." Martin shook his head, his eyes flashing. "I can't," he snapped. "My grandfather fled because he believed in justice. If I stop, I betray him. And myself." The next day, Martin, Sly, and John met in a small Italian restaurant in Little Italy. The place smelled of fresh basil and tomato sauce, with Frank Sinatra's voice drifting softly from the speakers. They sat in a private room, away from prying eyes. Sly, in jeans and a leather jacket, looked like he'd just stepped off a movie set. He glanced at Martin. "Cousin, you've given us one hell of a ride," he said, but his smile was warm. "I thought my Rocky film stirred things up, but you've outdone everyone." Martin gave a faint smile. "Sorry, Sly, but I had to." John, cradling coffee, leaned forward. "Guys, we've got a problem. Threats. Reactions in Italy. And rumors that someone doesn't want that chest found. Marty, are you sure you want to go to Sicily?" Martin nodded, his face resolute. "I have to," he said, "but not alone. Sly, will you come with me?" Sly laughed, but his eyes were serious. "You want me, an old boxer, crawling through Sicilian ruins," he said. "But you know what? I'm in. If it's our family, we do it together." John felt the tension in the room ease. He raised his cup. "To family," he said, "and to the truth, whatever it is." 2 weeks later, Martin and Sly landed in Palermo. The city greeted them with the scent of the sea, the clamor of street markets, and the chime of church bells. They were joined by a local historian, Signor Rossi, a wiry man with a gray beard who knew Sicily's history like the back of his hand. They stood before an old stone house near the Santa Maria Church, mentioned in the letter. The house was half ruined, overgrown with moss, but still standing. Rossi pointed to the basement. "If the chest exists, it's there," he said, his voice trembling. "But be careful. Palermo has many eyes." Martin and Sly descended into the dark basement, holding flashlights. The air smelled of damp earth and old stone. Sly cracked jokes to ease the tension, but his hand tightly gripped a crowbar they'd brought just in case. After an hour of searching, Martin spotted a loose stone in the wall. They carefully pried it out, revealing a niche. Inside was a small, rusted metal chest. Martin's heart pounded. "This is it," he whispered. They opened the chest. Inside were yellowed documents, lists of names, dates, deals. And a letter from Francesco in his own hand. "I did this for justice. Let my children know the truth is worth fighting for." Martin felt tears well up. Sly put a hand on his shoulder. He was brave, Marty, he said softly. Like you. The documents proved to be historical. They exposed corruption in early 20th century Palermo, but held no modern weight. Yet for Martin and Sly, they were a treasure, proof that their grandfather was not a victim, but a fighter. Back in New York, Martin held a press conference with Sly. They displayed the documents and told Francesco's story. The response was mixed. Some Italian Americans cheered, others criticized. But for many, especially the older generation, the story became a symbol of hope, proof that truth could prevail, even a century later. John invited them back to the show. The studio erupted in applause as Martin and Sly took the stage. You did it, John said, grinning. You found the chest, told the truth. What's next? Martin looked at Sly, then at the audience. We didn't change the world, he said. But we showed that truth matters. And if that inspires even one person to tell their story, it's enough. Sly nodded, his eyes gleaming. And you know what, he added. Maybe Marty and I will make a movie about this. But I'm playing the grandfather. Laughter filled the studio, and John felt euphoria sweep through the room. Martin and Sly's story wasn't fully over. New debates, new stories lay ahead. But the small step taken on his show had sparked change. The door to truth had opened, and behind it was light. In Palermo, Signor Rossi stood by the church, gazing at the restored stone house. A plaque on the wall read, "In honor of Francesco Scorsese, who fought for justice." Rossi smiled. "Your time has come, Francesco," he whispered.